Hello friends, so today we will be studying module 5 concept disk management. So operating system is also responsible for various aspects of disk management. So here we will be discussing disk initialization, that is disk formatting, booting from the disk, and also we'll study how are we going to recover from bad blocks. First we will see disk formatting. So whenever we have a new magnetic disk, it is like a blank slate. It is just platters of a magnetic recording material. Before we can store any data into it, it must be divided into sectors that the disk controller can read and write. So this process here is called as low level formatting or physical formatting. So low level formatting fills the disk with a special data structure for each sector. The data structure for a sector typically consists of a header, a data area, and a trailer. The header and trailer contain information used by the disk controller, such as a sector number and error correcting code. In short, we will call it as ECC. When the controller writes any data into the sector during normal input-output operation, the ECC is updated with a new value calculated from all the bytes in the data area. So whenever we make any changes into the disk, so ECC is calculated for the new data whatever we have in that disk, or we call it as a data area, and even it is performed with the read operation. So whenever the sector is read, the ECC is recalculated and it is compared with the stored value. So here we are trying to check whether any changes are made to the data. So if the data is changed, then we call it as the data is corrupted here. So now for example, if the stored and calculated numbers are different, this mismatch indicates that there is a corruption in the data area for what data we have stored here, and this kind of data is called as bad, or you can call this sector as a bad block. So here the ECC is an error correcting code because it contains enough information that only a few bits of data have been corrupted. Now for example, here you will come to know what bits are corrupted, and you can make changes to only those bits and make your or recover your data which has been corrupted here. So here the controller automatically does this ECC processing whenever a sector is read or written. So here to use the disk to hold files, the operating system needs to record its own data structures on the disk. So it is done in the two steps. So the first step is here partition. So here we are going to see the partition of the disk into one or more groups of cylinders. So here each partition can be treated as a separate disk here. Though they are separate cylinders here, but they can be considered as separate disk. So for example, we can use one partition to hold a copy of the operating system's executable code, while another holds the user files. After partitioning, we have the second step, which is logical formatting or creation of a new file system. So in this step, the operating system stores the initial file system data structures onto the disk. The data structures may include maps of free and allocated space and an initial empty directory. So here you can just see which all blocks are allocated and which all blocks are free in this data structure. And next we will see raw disk. So some operating systems give special programs the ability to use a disk partition as a large sequential array of logical blocks. So without any file system data structures. So this array is called as here raw disk, and input output to this array is termed as raw IO. For example, some database systems prefer raw IO because it enables them to control the exact location of the disk where each database record is stored. So raw IO bypasses all the file system services such as buffer cache, file locking, prefetching, space allocation, file names, and directories. So we can make certain applications more efficient by implementing their own special purpose storage services on a raw partition. But most applications perform better when they use regular file services. So this is all about disk formatting. Next we will see boot block. So we all know that for a computer to start running, for example, whenever we switch on the power or the computer is rebooted, it needs to have an initial program to run. So this initial program here, it is called as bootstrap, and it is very simple. So it initializes all aspects of the system from CPU registers to device controllers and contents of main memory, and then starts the operating system. So to do this job, the bootstrap program finds the operating system kernel on the disk, loads the kernel into the memory, and then initiates the address to begin the operating system execution. So for most computers, the bootstrap program is stored in the read-only memory, that is ROM. So this location is convenient because ROM needs no initialization, as it is stored at a fixed location, and the processor can start executing when powered up or there is a reboot. And since ROM is read only, so it cannot be infected by any kind of viruses. But here we have one problem, that is changing this bootstrap code. Now if you want to change this bootstrap code, this requires changing complete ROM hardware chips here. So for this reasons, most systems store the tiny bootstrap loader program in the boot RAM, whose only job is to bring in a full bootstrap program from the disk. So whenever you want to make any changes to this, it can be, so the bootstrap program can be changed easily here without replacing any of the chip here. So here you can just write a new version simply onto the disk, because the bootstrap program is stored into that partition which is called as the boot block at a fixed location on the disk. So the disk that has a boot partition is called as a boot disk or system disk. So we'll see here the booting process from the disk in Windows 2000. So as you can see this in the figure, Windows system places its boot code in the first sector of the hard disk, which is called as MBR. This is here master boot record. So booting begins by running code in the ROM by directing to MBR. MBR contains table listing partition from the hard disk, which contains the starting address of each partition for booting. So next we will see bad blocks. Now what are bad blocks? If any data is corrupted, then that block itself is called as here bad blocks. Okay, so as we know, disks have some moving parts and some small tolerances in it, so which may cause some failure to the disk. So sometimes the failure is complete and the disk needs to be replaced, and its contents can be restored from the backup media to the new disk. So here one or more sectors become defective. Then even whatever the sectors which are defective here, those are called as bad blocks here. It is not that if you perform any operation on the disk and the disk will be affected. Even most disks which come from the factory, which are new, they are coming with the bad blocks. So here we can handle these bad blocks in variety of ways, or we can recover from these bad blocks in various ways. Though first one we will see here is with the disks with the IDE controllers. So here the bad blocks are handled manually. So for example, you can just consider the MS-DOS format. So here we are going to have a logical formatting as a part of the process which scans the disk to find the bad blocks. If the format finds a bad block, it writes a special value into the corresponding file allocation table entry to tell that the allocation routines not to use that bad block. If the blocks go bad during normal operation, that is while normally you are writing something into the block or you are reading something, a special program which is called as check disk, that is CHK-DSK, must be run manually to search for the bad blocks and to lock them away as before. So here whichever blocks are corrupted, those are found out and those are stored in the file allocation table. You are marking in the file allocation table saying that you are not saying to the other allocation routines not to use that particular block which is already corrupted here. One more aspect we'll see here is that is through the SCSI disks. So the first one we had seen with the disks with the IDE controllers. The next, the more sophisticated disk, which is SCSI disk, it is used in high-end PCs and most workstations and servers, and these are smarter to handle the bad blocks. So here the controller maintains a list of bad blocks on the disk. The list is initialized during the low-level format which is at the factory and is updated over the life of the disk. Low-level formatting also sets aside spare sectors not visible to the operating system. So the controller can be told to replace each bad sector logically with one of the spare sectors. So here we are going to use one spare space for the bad blocks here. So now this scheme here, it is known as sector sparing or forwarding. So here now we'll consider one example. A typical bad sector transaction might be like, first, if you are the operating system, now for example we'll consider that or assume that we have one logical block into the disk whose number is 87 and that is a bad block or that is corrupted. So here the operating system tries to read logical block 87. The controller calculates the ECC and finds that the sector is bad. It reports this finding to the operating system. So the next time that the system is rebooted, a special command is run to tell the SCSI controller to replace the bad sector with the spare. So here whenever the system requests the logical block number 87, the request is translated into the replacement sector's address by a controller. So whichever sector we have made it as a spare here, now that sector we are going to redirect to that sector, that spare sector, whenever we are requesting to use or requesting for logical block number 87. So here such a redirection by the controller may be optimized by the operating system's disk scheduling algorithm. So here we have what happens here is, For more reasons, these disks are formatted to provide a few spare sectors in each cylinder and a spare cylinder as well. So whenever a bad block is remapped, the controller uses a spare sector from the same cylinder if possible. So this is about sector sparing. So you are going to consider one sector as a spare, and whenever you find any bad block, that block will be redirected to the spare block here. Yes. So we have one more alternative technique, that is for this sector sparing. We have one more method, that is sector slipping. So you are going to replace the bad block by sector slipping. So we'll consider one example to understand this sector slipping. Suppose that logical block number 17 becomes defective and the first available spare follows sector 202. Now the block number 17 is defective here and your spare block is numbered, that is 202. Then the sector slipping would remap all the sectors from 17 to 202. That is, you are going to move from 17th block to 202. So how you are going to move here? Now for example, you are having sector 202 as a spare here. So this would be copied into the spare first. So 202 will be copied into the spare first. Then the sector 201 will be copied into 202. Then the sector 200 will be copied into 201, so on. Then 199 to 200, like this, so on, by moving to the moving down to the one position until you will get the sector 18. So sector 18 will be copied into sector 19 and sector 18 will be having a free space in it now, so that you can move sector 17's data to the sector 18. Okay, so this concept is called as here sector slipping. So you are slipping all the data from one sector to other sector by moving down to the one position here. Yes, so this is how we are going to recover from bad block in two environments, that is IDE and with the SCSI controller. So here we can't say that the replacement of a bad block is not totally the automatic process. Whenever if you say that the data is bad, then usually that block data is lost here. So thus we can say that if you have a soft error in the sense the error which is not that effective, then only you can repair that particular block. If you have a hard error, then usually we lose the data whatever you have into that sector. So if you have got any hard error, the error which is more effective, then that requires manual intervention for recovering from that particular error here. This is nothing but bad blocks. So this is what we have studied regarding disk management. So next we will see swap space management. Now what is this swap space management? What are we going to study here, or why we require swap space? We will study here with one example. So what is swap space first? A swap space is a space on hard disk used as the virtual memory extension of a computer's real memory. Having a swap file allows computer operating system to pretend that you have more RAM than you actually do. So why we require swap space? When the amount of physical memory, that is RAM, is full and the system needs more memory resources for new processes, then system may get slow or collapse because there is no physical memory available. So to make this RAM more efficient as compared to present state, we require to use the swap space here. So the main goal for the design and implementation of swap space is to provide the best throughput for virtual memory system. So here we will see now swap space usage and its location and one example. So swap space use, we can see here. The swap space is used in various ways by different operating system. So it depends on the implementation of memory management algorithms. For example, systems that implement swapping may use swap space to hold the entire process image, including the code and data segments. So here we also use paging systems, which we are using simply to store pages that have been pushed out of the main memory. So the amount of swap space needed on a system can be therefore vary depending on the amount of physical memory, the amount of virtual memory that it is backing, and the way in which the virtual memory is used. So it can range from a few megabytes of disk space to gigabytes. Some operating systems, for example Unix, allow the use of multiple swap spaces. So those swap spaces are usually put on separate disks. So the load placed on the IO system by paging and swapping can be spread over the system's input output devices. So this is about the swap space usage. Next we will see the swap space location. Now the swap space can reside in two places. So swap space can be carved out of the normal file system, or it can be in a separate disk partition. You can store it in these two places. So if the swap space is simply a large file within the file system, normal file system routines can be used to create it, name it, and allocate its space. This approach, which is very easy to implement, but it is not that efficient. Why? Because navigating the directory structure and the disk allocation data structure takes time here, and you require some extra disk accesses here. So one more method is the external fragmentation, which can greatly increase the swapping times by forcing multiple seeks during the reading and writing of the process image. So we can improve this performance by caching the block location information in physical memory, and by using special tools to allocate physically contiguous blocks for the swap file. But the cost of traversing the file system data structures here remains same. So here it is very simple to implement, but it is inefficient, as considering with the time, and you are going to have extra read write accesses, and you are having more seek time required here. And the next approach we have here is alternate approach. We can use or we can create the swap space in a separate disk partition. You can create a separate disk partition, and then you can create that as a swap space. So here no file system or directory structure is placed on this place. So a separate swap space storage manager is used to allocate and deallocate these blocks. So this here the manager uses algorithms which are optimized for speed rather than for storage efficiency. So in the previous approach, it was efficient for storage purpose, but it was not efficient for speed. But here it is a vice versa, or it is opposite of that. So here the internal fragmentation may increase, which is acceptable because the data in the swap space generally live for much shorter amount of time than files in the file system. So the swap area may be accessed much more frequently here, where you don't require much time to access this. So this approach creates a fixed amount of swap space during disk partitioning. So adding more swap space can be done only via repartitioning of the disk, or via adding another swap space elsewhere. So these were the two methods here for swap space location, one with the file system and one by creating a separate partition for the swap space. So both have its own advantages and disadvantages. And lastly, we will see the swap space management with one example. So here to illustrate these methods to manage the swap space, we'll see the example of swapping and paging in Unix. So here Unix evolved to a combination of swapping and paging as paging hardware became available. So here we'll see two examples, that is in Solaris 1 and in Solaris 2 environment. So in Solaris 1, which is also called as Sun OS 4, so here the designers made changes to the standard Unix methods to improve the efficiency and to reflect some technological changes here. So when a process executes, the text segment pages are brought in from the file system, which is accessed in the main memory, and thrown away if selected for page out. So it is more efficient to reread a page from the file system than to write it to swap space and then to read it from there. So instead of saving it into the swap space, here you are going to perform the read operation directly from the file system itself. Then the next you are having is Solaris 2. So here this allocates swap space only when a page is forced out of the physical memory, rather than when the virtual memory page is created. So this change gives better performance on modern computers which have more physical memory than older systems, and it also tends to page less. So here there is no requirement of much paging here. So this is all about swap space management. So here we studied the concept disk space management and swap space management. So I hope you all have understood this concept. Thank you.